suppose. Okay, what else do I need? Paint, papers. So I normally collect a lot of catalogs, and they offer inspiration sometimes if it's a gallery catalog. I also pick up books from sidewalks and anything that I could potentially use as inspiration or as material to decoupage my bottles with. And this one's cool. I don't even know where I got it, but it has all these words and quotes on the other side which I could use. And I like this aesthetic of magnetic poetry. And people often ask me how each bottle is created or coined, and this is how it happens. Sometimes I just work with what I find, and then I build on it based on what people give me as well. So the quote comes to define what the overall aesthetic of the bottle is going to look like. That's kind of cool. It's something along the lines of dream of sky through the years, delicious all delight. Something there. Because I like the ocean being experienced through one's ears. We don't often think about listening underwater, but when you think about shrimp communicating and fish, you can hear a whole symphony, a chorus. And just like you hear it on land, a dawn chorus, when you wake up, you hear the birds chirping. Underwater, you can hear the fish waking up and singing in the mornings. And the reef comes alive the same way a garden comes alive. It's pretty incredible. And to hear a whale song or and then from here it's just a process of being a bit random, because oftentimes what I decoupage the bottle with isn't what the bottle is going to end up looking like, because I might paint over it or add new motifs, or maybe I get a quote about a species I haven't illustrated yet, and that's what that person wants on their bottle, in which case the bottle will change completely. So right now these bottles don't have quotes yet. I don't know who I'm going to ask. So this is just the first step. I think that's what the art brings alive in me, is the child in me, and I get to be messy and work with paste, and it's weirdly therapeutic. The cool thing about Mod Podge is it actually weatherproofs the bottle while you paste around with it, so it takes care of two things in one stroke or one application. This project came about because I was actually doing a beach cleanup in the Dominican Republic, and I was listening to Sting's song Message in a Bottle, and I was reminded that these bottles could become more than just waste objects, that they could become artifacts and carry messages of hope, and not just be recycled, which only 1 in 4 bottles are recycled, but that they can also be upcycled into an art object that'll last the test of time, because it brings in more value as something creative. And I wanted the very thing that becomes disposable to us, that becomes meaningless to us, to find value and meaning, and to rather reinvent its narrative. And that's what I've done with Message in a Bottle. Each bottle represents something more than it once was, and it now becomes a vessel, a conduit for a message that would have otherwise gone unheard. And in that way, it serves as a time capsule. So if I got a message in 2012 from a scientist, it's not the same message as I would get from a scientist in the world today. Because the amount of carbon emissions in the atmosphere has changed, the ocean chemistry is changing with every year, and so what scientists tell me changes with each year. That's my puppy. I just got him. He's a rescue, but he's incredibly cute. And he knows he's being filmed. Oh, there's your ASPCA commercial, Onyx. You just need Sarah McLachlan in the background. And I would say this is like when I started out, I wasn't as conscious about how every choice I make affects the world around me, and now I'm acutely aware of it. So I could have easily gone to a breeder or a pet shop and gotten a dog, which is what I was brought up with. My family did that. But doing the kind of work I do, which is all about enabling other organisms and preserving a wild future and empowering people who are otherwise marginalized, I couldn't bring myself to not do the right thing, which is to go to a shelter and give an otherwise abandoned animal hope. And I think that's what we can do with our every action. We can give hope, we can bring love, we can change the narrative one life at a time, one choice at a time. So it's not just about the art. I think one of the quotes I often say is that I art as I act and I act as I art. So I think it's important to translate what I create into my everyday life, so I'm not just pontificating without actually living my truths. The pieces of paper being a bit sparkly, and there's like a level of darkness yet like shimmers of light. I feel like it could be good for a bioluminescence or blackwater dive related bottle. Thinking, wow, when your eyes focus into this pitch black water, all you see is beauty and light and life. Over 1 million metric tons of life comes to the surface every night to eat, which is extraordinary. It's the largest migration that happens in the world. So this bottle is probably going to represent that there's life even when we don't see it, because they're microscopic. You can see, larvae of lobster, which are like that big. It's barely visible, but when you focus, when you pay attention, when you really see the world that you live in, they come into focus and it changes everything. A column of water that looked like it had nothing in it, no life in it, becomes the most alive space. Yeah, this is a very messy job. I drip glue everywhere. So this usually gets finished and then cures for a day. It has to dry out, and then the paper all will stick together and become a really nice even layer or coat for the bottle. And that'll determine whether I want to paint on flat surfaces and then incorporate the paintings onto the bottle, or paint directly on the bottle. Depends on the mood, depends on the message, depends on what I'm inspired to create in the moment. So the CEO of the Ice Hotel in Sweden and Iceland gave me the following quote, which is what I used to create this bottle, which was inspired entirely by the idea of making ice sculptures. It is a very transient medium, but the art that's created out of it stands the test of time. To this end, his quote is, "It is in the meeting between a hand and nature that we create art. The local climate captures the movement of the river when it freezes in the winter, and it allows us to create art out of nature's annual transformation, the ice. Nature provides the temporary raw material, and when spring arrives, our art melts and returns to nature. The art might be ephemeral, but its impact is timeless." And that's why I do art, to convey messages about conservation, because the art itself allows the message, the content, to stand the test of time. So that's a finished bottle, and usually I need to dry it upside down because the bottom shouldn't get stuck to the sheet it's curing on. This is from the bin downstairs.
Why do you dive?
I dive because you never know what you're going to see underwater. It's not your primary habitat. It's not where you live. It's not where you're comfortable. You have to be mindful of every breath you draw. It makes me value my life more to be underwater than on land, because I don't think I breathe as consciously on land. But when I'm underwater, every breath matters, and you're acutely aware of how much air you have with you. And that makes every breath drawn and what you see in that breath so much more important. And I think that's why I love diving, because it makes me ultra focused in the present moment. And I do nothing but be in that moment. Because if you are anywhere else, you miss out on your dive buddy trying to get your attention, or a small fish swimming by you, or a shark encounter. It all happens so fast. When I go underwater, it is disheartening to see reefs in worse shape than I saw them the year before, because you can see within your own lifetime a landscape being denuded that we don't even live in. It's not our primary habitat and we're still destroying it, and that's really unfortunate. But that's also because we don't know when to stop taking. We don't say, hey, I need to eat fish today. I need something to put in my belly, so I'll go get a fish and eat that fish. We think, hey, if I catch 10 fish today, I can not only feed me, but I can also feed somebody else and charge them extra for that fish. So we don't stop at one, we stop at nothing. And we keep taking and taking and assuming that all these organisms can keep replenishing, and they don't. So I don't think we take very good care. We're not very good stewards of the planet. Some of us are trying, but most of us are just ignorant and going about business as usual, and that's not gotten us very far in life, because ultimately we are dependent on the planet. When I started seeing bright colors in the magazine, along with patterns that look like fish scales, but they're actually just mosaic tiles, and I thought, hey, you know, that might look interesting. And you never know until you give it a shot. And that's the beauty of it, is with art, I just cut things out and then see what comes out of it. And sometimes it's cool, like that landed perfectly. And other times it's just unanticipated, and then you see what you want to do with it. Like that won't pop. So I need like contrast colors for the fish to pop, otherwise it's just going to look like it's part of the... So that's what I'm going to do with this bottle. Change of plans. I'm going to do a mosaic. I think the commonality between creativity and the wild that I like to conserve is that both happen in the moment. They can be spontaneous. So there's a direction shift both underwater and when it comes to art. And that keeps it alive. Like the work speaks back to you and tells you what it wants to be. These are probably fish that don't even exist. Just doing whatever I feel like. Scientists would have a thing or two to say about that. I just gave rise to my own species.
Why we don't care?
I think people don't spend enough time in nature to care. We don't know what we're missing, and therefore we don't care to protect it. If we saw it, then we would do something to... Because we only protect what we love, and we need to witness it. We need to have a tactile moment where we emotionally relate to something. It has to become tangible. And for the most part, most of nature is not accessible to the vast multitudes. And most people don't dive. Most people don't go snorkeling. Most people can't afford to. And that has to be borne in mind when we talk about people being negligent. It's not that they want to be apathetic. It's that they don't have access. And access is privilege, which is why those of us who can do those things, it's up to us to have the presence of mind and bandwidth to use that understanding, that experience to spread the word and get others to care about what they don't have access to. You know, and it's the whole beauty of message in a bottle is that no two bottles look alike. I've done like 265 of these already, and this year I'll be doing another 100. So 365 bottles in total, because I want to create a bottle and have a voice in it for every day of the year. So we come together as a revolution of voices, as change makers for a better planet, a wilder planet, and within the time that the Earth takes to revolve around the sun. So a revolution within a revolution. I think knowledge is power. I think access is imperative, and the fact that National Geographic Encounter gives me both through my work and for my work is pretty extraordinary. As an artist, I think the most rewarding thing is being able to reach people and to change the way they know or experience life around them. And when they get to see your work and it actually does that, it resonates with them, and they come back from that experience and write you or email you to tell you about it, I don't think you could ask for more as an artist. It's pretty emotionally moving and personally very meaningful. Because why do you do what you do? It's to get a message out. It's to help people experience something that they haven't before. So when they tell you exactly that, you know you've succeeded. And all the hard work, all the late hours, all the messiness, all the not having a social life came to mean something. And also it's weird, it's like you give birth, it's like having children, right? Each one of these pieces becomes a child that I've given rise to. It's something I've spent time with, that I've gotten to know intimately, cared about, and then I give it up to the world around me. And when you first give it, there's always that separation anxiety. I'm like, oh God, I'm parting with this work. Is it going to be safe? Is it going to be okay? Will it be received well? And you have all the same concerns that you would have for an actual child, because it feels like a part of you that is out in the world, and will it be safe there? And to experience that entity as its own thing, that it comes to life and interacts with people and matures over time and perception, you see it grow and be received in ways that you didn't even think it would be received in, and it enriches other lives and it gives back and it becomes more than just you. So I think that's the best part about creating art that reaches people. I have moments where I have a love-hate relationship with a canvas. If it takes too long or if it's not resolving itself, I do talk to it. I talk to my art a lot, and sometimes it takes a while to talk back, and that's when I get annoyed and I leave it, or I walk away from it for a while. But actually for off late, the more I've resolved me, the less volatile I am while I'm creating. I just zen out and keep going. And I also realize you can't ever ruin a piece of work. You just have to keep looking at it and interacting with it, and it'll tell you when it's being overdone or when it no longer works. And you have to know when to stop. It will tell me that it's finished when you know that it's occupied, that it has a point of focus, and there's enough going on in it that captures the eye, but it's not saturated. There are moments in the past when I first started creating where I went past that tipping point, and when you saturate a canvas, it's the worst thing, because then it's boring, it's flatlined. And it's no longer dynamic, it's no longer engaging the way it was when it was more sparse. So the trick is to never fully occupy it, to leave some space for imagination, for the viewer to step in and experience the piece. So it's not just your perspective and your story, that there's a third element to it, which happens only when it's seen by others, and others bring their energy and way of looking at it to the piece, enriching it with more depth, more perspectives than just you. And sometimes you have to wait and see, right? I'll finish this and then it might just look like camouflage, which may be interesting because it's kind of pattern paper against pattern paper, so maybe it's not even showing. Maybe you don't see the fish. But then again, maybe that's the beauty of it, that you don't actually see the animal. I don't enjoy planning because I don't like predetermining an outcome. I like dancing with life and seeing what comes out of it. And I mean that even for my everyday life. The only times I plan is when I know other lives are dependent on me and it's not just about me. But if I'm left to my own devices, I explore in the moment. I prefer being in the now and just seeing what comes out of it. But when you have a puppy who's constantly whining, you have to prepare for that ahead of time. Oh. Well, the art happened because I was losing my father and I felt compelled to create during a time of loss when I didn't know what else to do to express my grief. And once I began creating art, I realized that it could stand for something more than just an aesthetic expression, because I have a design background, which was in fashion designing. And with design, the thinking is that it actually serves a purpose. Anything you create serves a purpose. So design is all about resolving the form with a function so that it has a greater application and reason to be than just something beautiful to look at. And I think we've gone past the time when we can just create art for art's sake. It's no longer okay to just be creating art without being aware of the reality we live in, which is we're losing so much biodiversity. We're in the midst of a sixth mass extinction. Lives hang in the balance. So I want my art to stand for something more. And that's why I began channeling my creativity toward making a difference, towards having application, towards enabling others to care about the world that I care about. And for them to see it enough, to see it in new ways, which makes them feel uniquely empowered to act on that connection that they perceive in the moment that they interact with the work I've created. My favorite bit in all of this is painting the cap, because I'm like, oh, what is the color of the cap going to be? And I think in this one it should be like a reddish orange. There, that's finished. All the way to the bright red cap. So this is a turtle bottle, and it's for Eric Good, who runs the Turtle Conservancy, and it's a baby turtle dreaming of becoming an adult. And the premise is that we currently, when we release 1,000 hatchlings in the ocean, only one makes it to adulthood. So it is the dream.
Oh, that's so nice. How much time did you spend on each of these roughly? And I'm sure some took longer than others.
Yeah, it depends on the detail of the bottle, but I think roughly each bottle took anywhere between 1 to 4 hours. So this one was created for Harrison Ford because he is the ocean, and like no other voice out there, he decided to speak up as the largest resource covering our planet. 70% of our planet is blanketed in ocean, and that's Poseidon.
Wild. All right, give me 2 seconds on that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. That's great.